Again, tonight's message is called There's Such a Time as This. And these are the words of Mordecai himself. So we're going to go ahead and read the 16 verses that you find in the book of Esther. We're going to be reading those tonight from the New King James Version. And starting in verse 1, Esther chapter 4, the Bible says, "And when Mordecai learned all that had happened, he tore," and you might have a King James, and it says that he rent his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, symbolized mourning, and went out into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and bitter cry, and he went as far as the front of the king's gate. Couldn't go no further. Why? For no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. And then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, to take his sackcloth away from him. But he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her. She gave him a command concerning Mordecai, to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasury to destroy the Jews. And he also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he might show it to Esther, explain it to her, and that he might command her to go in to the king to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Well, then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's province know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king, who has not been called, he has but one law: put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go in to the king these 30 days. So they told Mordecai Esther's words. And Mordecai told them to answer Esther, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan, and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days," hint, hint, "night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Now, when we look at the topic of such a time as this, we are looking at two people who are beginning to realize that they're going to have to take a stand. And if you've got the introduction here, I'm one of these people, I like old sayings, and most of us have heard the old saying of the adage, that behind every good man, there's a good woman. It's true. It's true. Behind every good man, there's a good woman. I heard a man one time say this in a comedy routine. He said, "But behind every good man, there's a shocked mother-in-law." And so a different kind of twist on it. But I got a little bit of a history here, and I've said this before in our study in the book of Esther. If there's a book that I enjoy in the Old Testament, just sitting down and reading it for the pleasure of reading it, it's Esther. I love reading the book of Esther. I love reading the book of Esther. I love reading the book of Ruth. And if you want to look at opposites, polar opposites, as far as the way that God delivered and that God came through for both of these women, I mean, they're 180 degrees out. Ruth told Naomi, she said, I'm going to go to your land, and your land will become my land. Your people will become my people, and your God will become my God. And here we have a lady by the name of Esther. She's in a foreign land. She's as backslid as a goose. She has no indication whatsoever that she has any idea right now that she's ever going to return to the Lord. But still yet, God's going to deliver. And so when we look at this and we see the situation that Esther finds her in, that we're going to find out in life that there's going to be situations that's going to come along that we're just going to have to be proactive. We're going to have to jump in and just grab the bull by the horns. You're going to have to handle it, because if you wind up trying to be reactive, then you're going to find out you're going to have to deal with the aftermath. And too many people and Christians, and let me say this about Christians, too many Christians, while we're trying to be nice, we become, instead of proactive, we become reactive. And we have the ostrich syndrome, where we take and we stick our head in the sand and just hope while we've got our head down in the sand and not look around and seeing all of the chaos that's going on around us, that when we finally take our head out of the sand, that it's just going to pass us by. That the problem will just go away on its own. This isn't going away on its own. What's happening here from the decree that came from Shushan the palace, that came from the heart of wicked Haman, signed by the pen and sealed of a wicked king by the name of Xerxes the Great, that is to exterminate an entire faith people called the Jews in the 127 provinces, knowing that the law of the Medes and the Persians cannot be changed. It's not going to go away. They're going to have to be proactive. And this is where that God himself expects us as his people to be proactive when it comes to the gospel. Think about this scene. We talk about when the Lord comes back that there's going to be a judgment where we're going to stand and we're going to have to give an account to the Lord. And the Bible tells us in the book of Matthew that he's going to take the nations and he's going to separate them like sheep and the goats. And those that are going to be on the right hand, he's going to say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I've made you ruler over many. When I was sick, you came and visited me. When I was hurting, you helped me. When I was in prison, you came and visited me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink of water. And I said, Lord, when do we ever see you do these things? But when you did it to the least of these, my brethren, you did unto me. But then he's going to look at those over on the left, and he's going to say, depart from me, you workers of iniquity, for I never knew you. And then he's going to go through the opposite of what they said. Another writer of the gospel said that they're going to look at Jesus and say, Lord, you've made a mistake. We have preached in your name. We have done great works in your name. We have cast out demons in your name. But he's going to say, I never knew you. See, they're trying to fix it later on, when the opportunity is past. The opportunity for someone to be born again through the gospel of Jesus Christ is now. Now. Proactive. Now is the accepted time. Now is the day of salvation. Not when you stand before the Lord and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do before you're separated from him forever. And so God is not going to allow those who refuse to accept his Christ to do so reactively after death when they stand before him. He gives us every opportunity and the means to deal with things before Satan brings them along in our life paths. And so with this being said, we're going to go ahead and look at such a time as this. Now, in verses 1, 2, 3, and 4, I want us to understand when we come to these times of trouble, like what Mordecai and Esther are dealing with right now with the Jews. Your being in crisis is not an accident. Your being in crisis is not an accident. Everything, the Bible tells us that the trying of your faith works patience. The trying of your faith works patience. And just like that soldier who has to go through battle to be battle hardened and to become a good soldier, the Lord takes us and he allows us to go through these hardships and these things that we have to deal with so that it builds our character. That's where the Bible tells us, and the Apostle Paul said, that patience builds character, that the trying of our faith builds character. It gives us that hope. It allows us to see that God is much bigger than any problem that will ever confront us. And so in verses 1 and 2 here, in chapter 4, when Mordecai perceived everything that was going on and what had happened, that we find out that he was clothed in sackcloth and ash. Now, the first thing we'll look at here in verses 1 and 2 is Satan's placement. Now, the Jews being in this position of possible extermination was not by accident. Haman has devilishly devised this plan so that he can kill his enemy Mordecai. Now, we've discussed previously, he's going a little overboard with it. He's making sure in their culture to make sure that descendants later on do not wind up rising up and avenging innocent blood that has been shed. They come in and they remove them all and they kill them all. And so that is the desire of Haman, that is to take care of the Jews that he sees as just as much of a problem as he did with Mordecai. Now, here's why Satan does what he does. When we get into these times of crisis that the Lord allows us to go through, Satan wants us in these crises to become discouraged. He wants us to be in despair. He wants us to be, as Mordecai was here, openly wallowing around in plain view in the dust of life's street. Satan hates us by design. His hatred for us is not an accident. But he wants us to be engrossed on the size of the crisis and not the size and the power and the strength of our God that has put us in this crisis so that we can be stronger. This is, with faith, the same as it is when someone looks at their body and says, I'm out of shape. And so when you get out of shape and you say, well, I'm going to do some push-ups, or I'm going to do some crunches, or I'm going to do some sit-ups, or I'm going to do some chin-ups, or I'm going to lift some weights. I go to Walmart to pick up some 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds, wherever it may be, or I'm going to go get a gym membership. The majority of the strength training that you're going to have is going to be what's called resistance training. And through resistance training, you build muscle. Now, that's how you start off. Now, I want you to remember this. Your muscles have memory. And let's say that you get in shape and then you get out of shape. And you say, well, I need to get back in shape. These muscles remember what it's like to be in shape. And so when you go back and you begin to exercise again, then these muscles build up even stronger the next time and build up faster the next time, because the muscle remembers the resistance that you put it under before. It can take it again, and even more so. And that's how you build a body up. It's the same thing when it comes to faith. It's the same thing that comes to faith. You build your faith muscles through resistance training. When God lets you go through crisis, he's not mad at you. He's not angry at you. He's not punishing you. He's getting you in shape. And if you have been through these things previously and then got out of shape, he's getting you back in shape through resistance training in your faith. See, Satan only wants us to go so far when it comes to our positions as king. When it comes to our petitions as the king, here's what he wants us to do. He wants us to get mad at God. He wants us to get upset at God. He wants us to get down on our knees and start screaming about how unfair God is. And that, God, you must not love us anymore. And when you do that, then you stop bringing your petitions to the king. You stop rebuilding those muscles. You stop progressing in your faith. And because of that, then it winds up in the long run injuring you. See, Mordecai stopped just short of the king's gate because the law prevented him from demonstrations of despair, sadness from that point. If you go to the book of Nehemiah, you find that when Nehemiah came before Artaxerxes, that his face could no longer hide the sadness that he knew about, that was happening because of the city of Jerusalem, that the gates have been pulled down, that the walls have been pulled down, that the gates have been burned with fire. And as Hananiah had told Nehemiah, that the city was in reproach. Well, Nehemiah comes before Artaxerxes, and Artaxerxes sees his face, and he said, Nehemiah, what's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with you except for sadness. And Nehemiah was afraid for his life. Mordecai is in the same predicament here. He knows if he approaches the king in this mindset and with this attitude and in these clothings of sackcloth and ash, that he'll be put to death. A pagan king is different than our king. Our king wants us to come before him. Our king wants us to bring our petitions. Look, if you're heartbroken, God don't want you to come to him any other way than being heartbroken. He wants you to come before him in the honesty of your petitions. He's not asking you to go home and wash your face, get your act together, and put on a smile before you come to him. He wants you coming to him just like you are. That's our king, because we have the privilege as his children of crying out, Abba, Father, Daddy, Daddy. See, Paul wrote in Hebrews chapter 4 in verse 16, therefore, let us approach the throne of grace with boldness, not fear. Mordecai stopped short because he was afraid. God don't want you being afraid. He wants you to approach his throne of grace honestly, boldly, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in the time of need. Now, this is what Jesus said about earthly kings. When Jesus got word that John the Baptist had been put to death, that the Bible tells us that he went out into the wilderness. And when he went out into the wilderness, that the people approached him, and the Pharisees and Sadducees approached him. And he began to tell them about John the Baptist and testify to them about John the Baptist. And he said that this man by the name of John the Baptist, that there's been no greater man ever born than John the Baptist. That John the Baptist was the voice that cried out in the wilderness. But listen to the question that Jesus asked them in Matthew chapter 11 and verse 8. What'd you go out in the wilderness to see? What did you think he was going to see? A soft man? A weak man? A man clothed with proper clothing instead of a leather belt, camel hair clothing? He ate wild honey and locusts. I mean, what did you go out in the wilderness thinking you was going to see? See, when people see us, they think that we're going to see those that are dressed in soft clothing, like Jesus said, because people who wear soft clothing are in king's houses. But when it comes to a soldier out in the field, he's got on his UDTs. He's got he's got on his uniform of the day, and it's usually dirty. It's usually worn. He looks like a soldier. John the Baptist looks like a soldier. He wants us to be honest. He wants us to look like a soldier. And look like a soldier means that you're going to go through crisis in life. And you're going to be put to the test. And folks are going to watch you to see the kind of faith that you have. And this was Satan's placement. Now, Esther's replacement is what we're going to look at next. Now, when Esther, and this kind of lets you know, when you look and see what Esther and how Esther handles this, Esther is completely in the dark about what her husband has done. She has no idea what her husband has done. She is not in the loop. And so when Esther was made aware of how Mordecai was acting out in the middle of the street, she wanted to make it go away. She didn't want the attention. So how was she going to do this? Now, I want you to look what it says in verses 3 through 4. In every province, it says in every province where the king's command decree went, there was great mourning, and this is how the Jews responded. But look at verse 4. So Esther's maid, Junit, came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. She was sad. She had empathy for what Mordecai was going through. But then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, take his sackcloth away, but he wouldn't receive them. So she was sad for him. She was sad for the Hebrew people. She showed compassion. She showed empathy, but still didn't deal with the problem that was going to happen in a year. In a year, the Jews are going to be exterminated. And so being sad didn't fix things. Having empathy didn't fix things. And so what are you going to do? What are you going to do? How are you going to invest? How are you going to interject? How are you going to involve yourself? And that's what ministry is. Ministry, faith-based ministry, the faith of the child of God through salvation in Jesus Christ is an active faith. It's not a faith that sits back as a spectator. It is a participant faith. God expects us to participate. So here's how she planned on getting rid of it. She sent him some nice clothes to put on. What he's got on is dirty. So she sent him some nice clothes to put on. Sort of like Joseph. When Joseph had to go stand before Pharaoh, he was dirty. And they wanted to make sure before Joseph went before Pharaoh and stood that he had on clean clothes. When you went before Pharaoh, you had to be clean shaven, your head, your face, no facial hair, nothing around the head, so he had to be shaven. And so Joseph had to look the part. Joseph had to look the part. And so someone sitting in King's Gate, like Mordecai, he's not supposed to have on sackcloth and ash and be in mourning. And so Esther sends him some fresh clothes to put on. Nice try. She's going to try to change the outside. She's going to try to change the outside. But change clothes don't fix what's going on the inside. Just because a lost person puts on a suit or a dress and comes to church, that don't mean that they're not still lost without Christ if they've never repented of their sin. Change clothes don't change things. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 23 and verse 27, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outside, outwardly, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanness." Then there's God's placement. So there's Satan's placement. There's Esther's replacement. But then there's God's placement. Now I'm going to chew my cabbage twice and go back to what I said first of the study tonight. If you are in a crisis right now, it is by design. It is by design. It's not something that's happening to you that all of a sudden God gets a text or some sort of an emergency broadcast system alert to where that all of a sudden he looks over the battlements of glory and goes, I didn't see that coming. That's not the way it works at all. Everything that we go through in life, God allows to happen, and it's by his design and through his permission. And it is for your betterment. Everything, no matter what it is. Everything is for your betterment. And so if you're in a crisis right now, God didn't just let you wander in that place all by yourself. He put you there. He puts us in these pickles so that we, as well as he, can see how we respond to adversity. Some of the most amazing words that I find in the scriptures, you find in the book of Daniel, when those three Hebrew men are challenged by Nebuchadnezzar himself. Now just think about it. These men that refused to bow to the image that was erected of Nebuchadnezzar and the music that was played to introduce that image, they were called on the carpet, not by a chamberlain or by a court eunuch or whoever it may be, as we see here in this scene. They stood before Nebuchadnezzar himself, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Azariah, Hananiah, Mishael, stood before Nebuchadnezzar, a ruthless man, a powerful man. And they said these words, "King, we're not going to be careful how we answer you." In other words, they're saying, we're not going to use soft words. We're not going to pick and choose our words and make you feel better about this. We're not going to be careful. Our God's able to deliver us. But if he don't, that's fine. We're still not going to bend and bow when we hear that music. It's just not going to happen. Made him mad. Now, when you take a stand for what's right, if you're in a crisis of faith, let's say that you're in the midst of some sort of decision that you've got to make, that you know the difference between right and wrong. If you do what's wrong, you're going to have to deal with the guilt of it and the understanding that one day you're going to stand before the Lord. And you realize that if you do what's right, there could be some dire consequences that you're going to have to deal with here on this earth. It may cost you a job, a promotion, whatever it may be. Choose what's right. Don't be careful. Just be plain, be open, and be honest. That's exactly what he expects us to do. He puts us in these pickles so that the world can watch how we respond. We can respond with graciousness, but it should never be with cowardice. I want you to notice Mordecai's response. When Esther tried to get him to take the clothing that she had sent, he received it not. He wouldn't have anything to do with it. Whether Mordecai stepped back, distanced himself from his cousin's offer, we don't know. We don't know if when he saw the clothing come and Hathach offered that clothing to him, we don't know if he recoiled from it, was repelled by it, if he moved back, if his hands, and y'all probably noticed I talk a lot with my hands, if his hands gave gestures to tell the story, even though that Esther may have not heard his words. We don't know. We just don't know. Whether he verbalized his refusal, we don't know. But we do know he wasn't having anything of it. He wasn't having any of it. And he refused to pretend that the date of his future extermination, the date of the extermination of his family members, his friends, his countrymen, his household of faith, it wasn't just going to go away on its own. When I spoke to the young lady this afternoon from Senator Warner's office, she boldly proclaimed that he was the co-author of that bill and he was going to stand behind it. And that's what she told me. Which told me right there that no matter what I said, he was going to vote how he wanted to vote. And that's fine. That's fine. He's going to stand before the Lord for it one of these days. And that's why a lot of folks will say, well, if my voice isn't going to matter, then why do I call? Then why do I involve myself in it? It's because it's the right thing to do. When he realizes that people of faith are not going to stand for this, then it makes him accountable when he stands before the Lord. And here's what she told me. She said, he's going to stand by that bill. He's the co-author of that bill. He's going to stand by it. And I told her, I said, ma'am, if it passes, I will tell you right now, Sandy Creek Baptist Church will not obey it. We will not obey it. We will not observe it at all, no matter what you say and no matter what you do. We will not obey it. We will do what's right. We will do what's according to the scripture, no matter what he says. He's not a king. He's just a politician. I serve a king. I'll honor what the king says. And the king says that he made them man and woman. And there was no confusion in that. He made them man and woman. He made the man from the dust of the earth. And from the man he made the woman. It was by God's design that he made us this way. There's no mistake. And God's people need to call your senators, no matter what state you're in right now, and you're watching this, you need to call your state senator and let them know what you believe about this. And tell them, if you pass this, we will not obey it. We will not obey it. Psalm chapter 77 verse 2 says this, and then I'll hush and we'll end it tonight. We'll start off here next week. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying, for my soul will refuse to be comforted. It bothers me, just to be blunt, to see the direction that our country is going right now. It just tears my heart up to see what America is doing right now. And to watch as we watch our politicians and we watch people who make decisions for the American people, make those decisions based upon the theme of the day, the crisis of the day, trying to be woke instead of being awakened by the Spirit of God. It should bother us to watch how this is going down right now. To see what's happening to the America that was founded upon the principles of serving the Lord. And serving the Lord as we knew what was right and how we saw fit. It bothers me. But I'm not discouraged. I'm not discouraged a bit. I've said along for many, many years, these days got to come about. Somewhere along the way, the world's got to be prepared for an Antichrist. And nothing exempts us from being part of that day as we watch it come in. Nothing. And so Jesus warned the disciples, and I'll warn you this evening. When you begin to hear of wars and rumors of wars, and you begin to see all these things as Jesus says it was in the days of Noah, so it'll also be when the coming of the Son of Man comes. And when you see these days coming, don't look down, look up. Your redemption draws nigh. Heaven's closer today than what was this time last week. Let me encourage you, the household of faith, the saints of God. Stand strong in the Word. Stand up for what's right. Be proactive. Don't be afraid. Don't fear. Because greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. God bless you folks for being with us tonight. We'll close in prayer. We'll pick back up here, Lord willing, in the creek don't rise on the 10th. And let me write that down. And don't forget, call your senator, that young lady, the young lady from Senator Kane's office, told me that their schedule is fluid, whatever that means. And so their schedule's fluid, and so what they'll wind up doing when they can put it on the floor, they'll put it on the floor. And so don't wait. They passed that thing last Thursday through the House. I knew it was going to go through the House. The only way it's going to stop is if it gets stopped in the Senate. So encourage your state senators to vote no on the Equality Act, and let's make sure that this gets defeated. All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, thank you for your love. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for your grace. And Lord, just because we stand against those folks that are doing wrong, Lord, doesn't mean we don't love them. God, we understand that every person, no matter what they may believe and no matter what they may be involved in at the moment, Lord, every one of them has value. Every person that walks on the face of the earth today, Jesus Christ came and died for their soul. Every one of them. That includes those, Lord, that are behind the pressing and the pushing of this diabolical and demonic bill. Lord, I also pray, though, that through your Son, Jesus Christ, and through the stance of your people, that this will be thwarted and it will be stopped. And God, I pray that you would help us to be proactive in that advancement of faith. God, give us courage for the day in which we live. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for the example of courage that hung before us there on that cross on Calvary. And I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you, folks. Don't forget, we'll be back at Sandy Creek this coming week. 9 o'clock early service, 10 o'clock Sunday school, 11 o'clock late service. God bless you. If you're watching me from another area other than Central Virginia, let me encourage you to support your home church, your pastor, your people. Go and be involved in your faith at the local church. God bless you. We love you. Good night.